Have you ever wondered how far the Mexican drug cartels will go to send a deadly warning? When a father and son crossed the notorious Los Viagra cartel, they found out in the most horrific way imaginable. In the hills of a municipality in La Unión, near the border of Costa Grande and Tierra, Caliente, Mexico, a sinister video surfaced showing a father and a son brutally tortured and executed. Their violently damaged bodies were arranged to deliver a chilling message to the cartel's enemies. But who were these victims, and what led them to such an awful fate? Today, we uncover the terrifying true story behind this video that exposed the shocking violence of Mexico's most ruthless cartels. It's a tale of corruption, betrayal, and the human costs of organized crime going out of control. When drug empires collide, innocents become pieces in the bloody battle for money and power. The images were shocking, even for those used to cartel violence. Two men tied and gagged, submitting to their unfortunate fates in the middle of the hills. Their unknown story was about to end in unimaginable pain under the hands of the Los Viagra gunmen. Soon, the graphic scenes of torture and death would spread virally with no context, leaving endless unanswered questions about this awful crime. In the summer of 2018, a horrific video emerged showing the graphic torture and execution of a father and son at the hands of a Mexican drug cartel. The shocking footage shows the hostages going through unimaginable minutes of intense violence that leads to their unfortunate deaths. This traumatic video, entitled Guerrero Flaying, offers a quick look into the harsh, cruel parts of Mexico as cartels battle for money and power. The first clip of the video shows the beginning of the victims' terrifying experience. They sit tied on the ground with their hands behind their back and mouths wrapped in white cloth, while the heartless members of the cartel stand over them. The members begin their torture by brutally beating the father with a large wooden rod, continuously hitting his body as punishment while his son helplessly watches. Already bruised and beaten, things take an even darker turn for the worse. One of the cartel members then suddenly cuts off the father's head right in front of his son, using a small knife similar to a box cutter. The attacker forces the father's head back and, without showing any mercy, saws into his neck with a small blade in front of the helpless son. The blood splatters across the son's torso as his father's separated head gets thrown onto the dirt surrounded by blood. The son reacts instantly with soft screams and pain-filled cries, shocked at witnessing his father's death. Yet the father did not resist or fight back while being killed. He seemed to accept his harsh fate, although it is highly possible for the drugs and trauma to influence such an acceptance of death. With the father gone, the sadistic criminals next set their sights on the terrified son. The attackers clearly wanted to maximize his suffering, dragging out his torture as pure entertainment. Instead of quickly killing him like his father, they slowly and carefully begin cutting off the skin from his chest and abdomen using knives. Without any care, they peeled back blood-soaked layer after layer of skin, eventually showing the muscle tissue and internal organs to the camera. The young boy tried to protect himself by crossing his arms around his chest, but the ruthless gang continued their assault until his ribs, lungs, and pounding heart lay open in their arms. In intense pain and losing blood, the victim pleaded for forgiveness, while his attackers pressed on without mercy. Finally, after removing the still-beating heart, they ended their horrific ritual by slicing it against the dead body left cruelly displayed. The final scene reveals the awful aftermath of these killings, with two dead bodies left side by side in a blood-stained plastic sheeting. As a chilling remark, the murderers sent across death threats to the victims' close relatives, swearing this had only just begun. Their taunts emphasize the continuous brutality that cartels use to control Mexico's rural areas with an atmosphere of fear. This cold boast highlights the nature of cartels, looking to bully rivals and civilians through graphic violence. With each brutal act documented on film, the victims' humanity weakened even more. They became props in the cartel's theater of terror, reduced to whimpers and bloodstains by the time their lives were finally taken away. While their identities and backstories remained mysteries, their painful final moments were now forever remembered online for the world to see. The alleged location of the killings was Guerrero, one of Mexico's most troubled states. There, the infamous Guerreros Unidos and Los Viagra cartels battle for control of heroin production and trafficking routes. Guerrero is the country's top opium poppy producer, with remote mountain areas perfect for hidden plantations. Moving drugs from Sierra Madre del Sur across Mexico and over the border into America's narcotics market has made Guerrero a strong ground for organized crime. Cartels look for dominance and revenge with constant violence, while civilians are caught helplessly in the middle of it. Los Viagras rose to power in these tough lands through alliances with other groups following the decline of the Beltran Leyva cartel. They emerged around 2013 when the Sierra Santana brothers, a group of former lime growers, broke from a local vigilante militia to enter organized crime. Initially, Los Viagras acted mainly as protectors, charging protection fees and removing enemies of the Knights Templar cartel who controlled Michoacan state. However, the armed uprising of Michoacan's self-defense groups weakened the Knights Templar, creating an opening for Los Viagras. Joining forces with New Generation Jalisco, the cartel continuously began expanding across Mexico. Los Viagras took control of heroin production and coastal smuggling routes in Guerrero. Their base was the Tierra Caliente region, a hot lowland area perfect for growing opium poppies. Their growing power brought Los Viagras into conflict with Guerreros Unidos, who also emerged from the Beltran Leyva elements. With backing from corrupt officials, Guerreros Unidos dominated parts of central Guerrero after driving out the Sinaloa cartel. Now, Los Viagras challenged them for control of the heroin trade. Both groups used savage violence and intimidation against each other and civilians to control territory and drug profits, leaving body parts here and there as warnings. Their terror attacks outdid even other Mexican cartels' cruelty, causing chaos across Guerrero. In this lawless environment, horrific crimes like the video went unsolved and unpunished. Experts guessed that the older person seen beaten and beheaded was the father of the younger one. However, there was uncertainty about who they really were and their connections to criminal groups. Were they low-level cartel members who somehow crossed their leader? Rival gangsters captured during a turf war? Civilians caught in the wrong place at the wrong time? Their lineage and backstory mattered little to their captors, who seemed motivated only by sadistic glee in torturing two helpless men. For those studying Mexico's underworld, the methods in the video matched Los Viagras' fame for cruelty. Their rise was marked by increasingly extreme violence against enemies. Beheading and cutting apart limbs became cartel calling cards used to terrify communities into giving up. Civilians were non-target damage in the narco power struggles taking over Guerrero. Los Viagras crushed resistance by targeting not just rival traffickers, but also police, reporters, prosecutors, and elected officials who opposed them. Mayors and city councils resigned en masse to avoid conflicts with the cartel. Much like Islamic State's terrorism videos, the sadistic footage was created both for internal control and external intimidation. Circulation of the murder scenes sent the message that cooperation with authorities would be met with horrific results. Los Viagras' methods showed agreement through trauma. Yet while Los Viagras seemed the likely suspects, certainty about the perpetrators remained unclear, much like all the details surrounding the sinister video. Almost nothing was known about the two men killed or what led to such cruelty towards them. With no criminal investigation or official accounts, only the unfortunate video was left to show us this tragedy. The story of whatever misfortune, betrayal, or debt these men had would never be known. They seemingly accepted their fate with resignation, aware that begging would not spare them, perhaps a hope that it might just be a quick death. But their captors had hard hearts and evil purposes. In the next few months, copies of the scenes were sent across all social media handles. Thousands were shocked at the bloodshed from behind their screens, sharing the link with curiosity. But no new insights into the victims came to light during the viral leak of the video. They remained anonymous casualties of cartel cruelty. Certain theories suggest the men were members of Guerrero Unidos, a prominent cartel themselves based in Guerrero State further south. Guerrero Unidos controls a territory containing opium poppy plantations used to mass produce and export heroin. Los Viagras have aggressively challenged their control over this illegal drug trade by taking over farms, labs, and transit corridors. These clashes spilled into neighboring states as both organizations made allies with rivals like the Sinaloa cartel too. Assuming the victims came from Guerrero Unidos, Los Viagras could have captured them during battles and then filmed their execution as a way of rebelling. Displaying their horribly damaged corpses sends a chilling message for gangsters on both sides not to intrude on Michoacan. For civilians trapped by the crossfire and violence as well, the gruesome propaganda seeks to inspire terror of Los Viagras. Another theory states that the doomed father and son were, in fact, betrayers who turned against the Viagras cartel, ordering their capture. called chapulines or grasshoppers in Spanish slang. Defectors and informants are considered among the highest offenses in the narco underworld. Cartels generally deal with disagreement and disobedience through torture or beheading. If the men betrayed or deserted Los Viagras, revenge through graphic execution sends a ruthless warning about the cartel's zero tolerance for disloyalty. Similarly, the dominant Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJNG, is known to brutally murder police, rivals, or anyone who defies them. Had these unknown captives abandoned Los Viagras or provided intel to rivals, their punishment would have been intended to intimidate gangsters from defecting themselves. Without clues, however, proof remains uncertain if they died as cartel casualties or unwilling as pawns instead. There is also another theory that the father was a dishonest cop who was secretly leaking information. Cartels like CJNG frequently bribe officers to act as informants and hitmen. If the father crossed Los Viagras as a corrupt official, his horrible fate would have been intended to scare other associates into obedience. This theory looks at hints indicating that the older victim might have had prior tactical training, possibly suggesting a background in law enforcement or the military. Cartels actively keep an eye on officials within municipal police departments, prosecutors' offices, and investigative bureaus, using bribery or intimidation to force cooperation. However, individuals who were once affiliated with these organizations and try to share sensitive information with opposing authorities risk facing brutal consequences if found out. While it's challenging to confirm the victim's background, the infiltration of Mexico's security forces by cartels could provide further insight. Many cartels, like the nationally dominant Jalisco New Generation Syndicate, aggressively co-opt command ranks that provide insider access to planning and directing criminal operations. They expect boundless obedience in exchange for steady bribes, issuing punishing torture as a consequence for not listening to them. Gulf cartel hitmen dumped 15 mutilated police officers' bodies along a Mexican highway leading to Texas. Their heads were placed in suitcases, while their disemboweled bodies were left exposed to the public. Messages from the cartel at the scene accused these officers of betraying their loyalty by allegedly accepting offers to support rival groups. Whether they were law enforcement officers, informants, or innocent bystanders, opposing cartels, like Los Viagras, often result in deadly consequences. Yet, despite the ongoing controversy and many theories, the exact backgrounds behind the victims in this infamous Guerrero flaying video remain unanswered even years later. The viral torture footage itself continues circulating through narco channels and hidden online communities to ignite outrage and morbid curiosity. But solid investigative developments, confirming the deceased individuals' identities or affinities, never publicly came from Mexican authorities, limiting them to nameless casualties of cartel violence. The unknown pair were fading memories when, in 2019, an unexpected breakthrough arose, generating new interest in the cold case. Disturbing details emerged, suggesting the two men had, in fact, been moral instead of outlaws. They were paying the ultimate price, not for crossing a cartel, but for daring to challenge one secretly. Amid Mexico's ongoing cartel chaos with staggering organized crime-related homicides year after year, these anonymous victims now symbolize hundreds of thousands killed and missing, while cartels ransack Mexico largely with impunity. As local communities wrestle anxiously with threats of violence, extortion, kidnappings, and forced disappearances, graphic propaganda like this video distills larger systemic issues of Mexican society. Bold regional cartel groups like Los Viagras establish extensive criminal networks characterized by corruption, brutality, and seemingly arbitrary cruelty, exploiting institutional dysfunction. Funded by billions in illegal profits, cartel leaders live opulent lives outside the reach of the law, deploying ruthless hit squads against both domestic and foreign rivals. Unfortunately, civilians often find themselves caught in the unending crossfire. The two victims featured in this horrifying video symbolize numerous innocent non-combatants trapped under the control and violence of ruthless cartels that terrorize Mexico's rural areas. Whether these individuals were involved in criminal activities or were innocent bystanders caught up in the chaos, their gruesome fate serves as a stark representation of the suffering endured by millions in rural regions, where cartel threats persist while state protection remains largely absent. For the majority of grieving families affected by organized crime, achieving justice and obtaining answers remains an elusive struggle. Shockingly high impunity rates, ranging around 93 to 95%, characterize Mexican homicide cases. Insufficient resources are allocated to investigations beyond high-profile assassinations that specifically target politicians, journalists, or activists. This situation leaves many ordinary citizens with limited recourse and little hope for resolution in the face of such pervasive criminality. So, like countless executions recorded and then circulated to amplify cartel propaganda, the graphic content within the Guerrero flaying footage reflects normalized cruelty that shows the breakdown of the rule of law. Rather than seek accountability for the victims or charge the perpetrators, officials often avoid acknowledging these incidents publicly to prevent additional cartel reprisals against their jurisdictions. This recurring pattern of governmental silence with no action creates an environment where horrifying violence against lower-class citizens becomes almost commonplace, and victims are dehumanized into nameless casualties. Their bodies are disposed of without ceremony, while their perpetrators escape accountability and reprisals. Facing a lack of alternatives, many impoverished individuals turn to criminal groups for basic necessities like food, medicine, shelter, and security, which are otherwise lacking in their communities. Young people, lacking viable opportunities, are drawn to the allure of purpose, profit, and prosperity promised by cartels that exert ironclad control locally. This growing recruitment further strengthens cartel influence on the ground, eroding state authority and stability. Mexican cartels have evolved into Hydra-like terrorist insurgencies, with their impact now reaching billions worldwide. The tragic, nameless victims mentioned here represent the loss of humanity amidst the chilling and seemingly endless statistics. Yet while the precise background behind this disturbing Guerrero flaying video remains a mystery, the bigger picture proves clear. Half a decade later, graphic cartel violence still devastates Mexico nearly daily, with vast regions where organized crime clans govern themselves. Ruthless killing machines like Los Viagras exert autonomy through cruelty, directly challenging the legitimacy of governing institutions. Unchecked bribery has enabled their leader, Nicolas Sierra Santana, along with his brothers, to capture Michoacan municipalities where they now tax, patrol, and bully captive populations like warlords. Federal intervention remains absent, granting free rein to marauding monsters. Warning signs at border crossings caution travelers against entering due to imminent dangers, signaling the effective surrender of sovereign control by the central Mexican government across Michoacan and surrounding states, tainted by blood money. Viewed through this perspective, the Guerrero flaying propaganda video seems less like a unique incident from Mexico's violent past in 2018 and more like a forewarning of the complete breakdown of order nationwide. In the absence of accountability, those responsible for such brutality only become more audacious, leaving communities to bear the brunt of the consequences. So ultimately, at its core, the tragic Guerrero flaying incident shows us the horrific struggles millions now face against such criminal organizations and corrupt officials in Mexican sovereignty due to the absence of the rule of law or state protections, with invisible empires now functioning as the de facto rulers of Mexico. Is it realistically possible for nonviolent approaches to security, justice, and human rights to take hold? If so, urgent strategic shifts are required for progress before thousands more face fates reminiscent of the two nameless prisoners callously butchered here. The decaying corpses left behind by renegade warlords must serve as catalysts, inspiring everyday citizens to collectively reclaim Mexico's tranquility block by block. Despite the tempting profits of narco-trafficking for desperate families, ethical grassroots resistance, protecting communities through nonviolent unity and sacrifice, may represent the last remaining chance at redemption. This is crucial before more ghostly men face the knives beyond the reach of mercy, salvation, or hope. The gruesome Guerrero flaying video represents only a small part of the extensive cruelty and bloodshed occurring on a nationwide scale across Mexico's cartel battlegrounds. A common thread among countless victims is their socioeconomic vulnerability, along with a lack of voice or agency to escape the violence that threatens Mexico's stability. Beyond the body counts, the humanitarian toll from organized crime is unimaginable. With over 300,000 Mexicans displaced as internal refugees, entire villages have transformed into abandoned ghost towns overnight as residents fled cartel invasions. Many now inhabit makeshift camps enduring appalling conditions similar to war refugees, with no clear paths back home in sight. And for those refusing displacement under threat, survival depends upon adhering to cartel dictates, no matter how exploitive or inhumane. Local shops and lime farmers now hand over quotas of their harvests or earnings to satisfy extortionist quotas. Violators risk kidnapping, torture, arson, and overwhelming force if late on payments or questioning orders. With municipal police and public officials on cartel payrolls, who can victims call for help? The cycle of violence thus continues, enabled by systemic entrapment and economic coercion, circumscribing civilian lives generation upon generation. Yet rays of hope persist in self-organizing groups that bravely challenge cartel occupations across Mexico's most dangerous regions through coordinated, non-violent action. In Cherán, for instance, indigenous Purepecha townspeople got rid of the intruding Knights Templar cartel in 2011 after a series of numerous abuses. Angered locals gathered upon the dens where cartel gunmen controlled illegal logging rackets in surrounding forests that were used for community water security. Through widespread civil disobedience, a united front, mainly of women and children, compelled the surprised intruders to leave their mountain home by drawing upon Cherán's ancient tradition of collective resource protection. They later formed armed citizen patrols to safeguard the newly liberated forests, ensuring the autonomy of their sanctuary through communal governance. Encouraged by this success, allied regional networks are now committed to replicating Cherán's remarkable achievement in challenging oppression through widespread non-cooperation. Triumphs like Cherán's provide models for how non-violent grassroots resistance can regain strength in territories overrun by external criminal groups. These methods harness the collective power of ordinary civilians to impede systemic exploitation, creating economic and social disruption until their demands are acknowledged. Such tactics aim towards making cartel, or corrupt government, domination so logistically troublesome and financially unrewarding that the intended oppression becomes unsustainable. Non-violent non-cooperation also holds the potential for sowing divisions among cartel members and allies whose participation hinges upon financial motives over ideological commitment. By disrupting cash flows at the street level through strikes, boycotts, and organized civil interference, the inherent vulnerabilities beyond the facade of cartel invincibility become exposed. At this point, negotiations toward security and accountability may emerge, supported by the leverage of withdrawing community compliance and business operations. However, attempts at mass organization come with immense risks, given the cartel's propensity for brutality against resistance. The path forward requires careful grassroots coalition building, thorough preparation, and a willingness to endure inevitable retaliation. External awareness and outcry must amplify local demands to prevent this burgeoning nonviolent movement from being ignored. Sadly, previous Mexican civic uprisings, such as the case of the 43 missing Ayotzinapa students, initially sparked global outrage before public attention waned, despite the ongoing struggles and heartbreak that the families continue to face today. Somehow, the spectacle and upheaval of modern geopolitics have desensitized many worldwide to the nightmares confronting too many Mexican communities, which are further crushed beneath the heel of greed and marginalized through neglect. Viewing Mexico's bloodstained cycle through the lens of this Guerrero flaying exhibit of human cruelty, observers beyond borders should acknowledge complicity and collective responsibility for allowing systemic gangrene to fester untended. It is crucial to raise international awareness so that calls for accountability do not drift into obscurity, as has been the historical pattern. Mexico is facing a very tough situation, and it's not just about what's happening in the country. It affects other places too. People need to come together and support families who are giving up a lot to make their communities safer. Everyone, no matter their political views or how much money they have, should speak up and show support for these brave families. We need to push for changes that can help fight against organized crime and prevent Mexico from becoming a failed state. To tackle the power and wealth of criminal groups causing so much suffering, Mexico can start by being more transparent about its finances, reforming its judicial system, seizing assets from cartels, and improving social services and economic policies. International help and partnerships with other countries can strengthen Mexico's ability to fight against corruption, which enables criminal organizations to operate almost like their own governments within the country. Upholding the rule of law is crucial to restore people's confidence, bring stability, and ensure justice. However, when Independiente rule took over, it proved to be just as cruel as Los Viagras at its worst. The cycle of exploitation continued under new leaders, with the splinter group's gunmen extorting towns, threatening villagers, and taking over property. The production of heroin continued without interruption, but now, the illegal profits were going to different people, while the abuses of power remained the same. While finding solutions may seem very complicated, and the outcomes uncertain, doing nothing will only make Mexico's situation worse, especially when events like the Guerrero flaying provoke moral outrage. Without public outcry demanding accountability, thousands more innocent lives might soon join the unnamed victims shown in these disturbing events. This horrific video provides just a glimpse into the dark atrocities committed by Mexico's ruthless drug cartels. Their brutal tactics destroy lives and instill fear across entire communities. But exposing these crimes is the first step toward justice. We hope this story helps shed light on the human cost of the ongoing cartel violence plaguing regions like Guerrero. What needs to happen for the cycle of violence to end and the rule of law to prevail? How can ordinary citizens be protected? Let us know your thoughts. And please remember to like this video and subscribe to our channel. By raising awareness through cases like this, we aim to motivate action against the corruption and impunity fueling these tragedies behind the scenes. Change starts with steps like having open discussions. Together, we can stand up for human rights and compassion in the face of cruelty. See you next time.